Hello and good evening, and thank you very much for coming to join us for the third in a series of dinners for the Steeple Times. The first time we had Peter Bleksley, the woke finder general, somebody who shakes things up on Talk TV. The second time we covered Ghislaine Maxwell and all her many problematic issues. And today we have the wonderful Andrew Lowney, who has written a book called Entitled. Now, it's the book of the moment. This is a book that has rocked and rolled everywhere. It has set the cat amongst the pigeons. This is a book that was published in August. Nobody would publish a book in August. This is the bestseller. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
So, Andrew, why did you choose to publish a book in August?
Well, actually, all my books have been published in August because for that very reason, that actually no one else publishes in August. The line is that the media are not there. But actually, can you all hear me, by the way? No, not very well. Okay, I will talk out. All my books have come out in August, and they've come out for a specific reason, that you can actually beat the bestseller list there. You can get into the bestseller list with actually quite low numbers. And my own experience is the press are actually looking for stories in August, and the press are around, and so it's actually a good time. My American publisher pulled out because they didn't feel there was going to be any interest in a book in August. But as we saw, the book went straight to number one on Amazon and straight into number one in the Sunday Times. So there's clearly a market there, and actually with 30,000 copies.
I think it was an absolutely brilliant move, and you literally have taken over the story, and then along came further stories.
Well, I've been very lucky with the timing because we had the Ghislaine Maxwell giving her testimony. We had the fight over getting the Epstein files released. We had the revelation of the Bloomberg emails, the sacking of Mandelson. So the story has sort of got a life of its own. People are looking to get some more background on the story. But in fact, if you look at the press cuttings, Andrew is in the press and Sarah Ferguson almost every day anyway. So it's actually been a running story for a long time. But to have a little bit of context and to have someone who can perhaps who's looked at the story in a bit of depth, I think is useful when people were looking for commentators.
So returning to the beginning, what inspired you to choose those two as a subject?
Well, it's the third of a trilogy of books about royal marriages. So the first book is on the Mountbattens, the open marriage there. The second is on the great love story of the 20th century, the Duke of Windsor and Wallis Simpson, and each time, of course, questioning whether that is the true narrative. And this is about the happiest divorced couple ever. But what I also wanted to do was, clearly Andrew would be in the news because of Epstein. I had my suspicions that he hadn't actually been perhaps a very effective trade envoy, and so I began to look into that. And actually all my books, going back to even before I started about the royals, are about establishment cover-ups.
So beginning your journey, you used a lot of freedom of information requests, and you met with a lot of hostility, I believe.
Yes, I'm a trustee of the Campaign for Freedom of Information. I've probably more than any other writer used the FOI Act, which is supposed to be to make papers available. And the rule basically in the States is if there's no reason to close it, then it's opened. Whereas if here, it's completely the opposite. If there's any reason they can keep it closed, they will. And that's sort of what happened. Previous books of mine have relied extensively on FOI to get stories out, and particularly FOI in America. I got the story out about Mountbatten's paedophilia from an FBI file. But here, actually, the government have managed to deploy every possible exemption. Sometimes they say they've got so much material that they won't bother to look for it. Sometimes they say they have nothing. And so, in effect, 4.5 years of putting in requests, over 100 requests, I've actually got absolutely nothing from FOI.
And out of your sources, the people you approached, I believe it was about 3,000. What percentage responded to your approach?
Well, the book was different to my previous books because my previous books have relied on documents, and that's what I'm trained to deal with. So this was, in some ways, a journalistic exercise. I had to interview people. Now, most royal books depend on actually quite a limited number of interviewees, and generally they're people who have often spoken before. But what I wanted to do was to widen the net, so I actually got 6 crates of all the cuts going back to the 1980s. I spent about 3 years just noting them to 12 lever arch files, and then I followed up all the names in them through the electoral roll, through LinkedIn, through Who's Who, through school lists, you name it, social media, comments pages, comments at the end of articles. And I approached 3,000 people, about 10% responded, but that was good enough for me. So there are about 300 people interviewed for this book, of whom I suppose some are on the record and some are not.
Now, you were obviously criticised by Jacob Rees-Mogg because he said your book had too many citations. How would you respond to that?
Well,
because I think this is your platform to give him a response, because I thought his interview with you was a disgrace.
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg kind of hijacked me on GB News. He didn't actually interview me. He just read out a whole series of his own thoughts about the book, which he hadn't really read. But the point, actually, what was interesting is that he claimed that I hadn't got affidavits from people to support some of the testimony. Well, you're never going to get affidavits, particularly with people speaking off the record, people like former members of staff who have signed NDAs. So that was a slightly unreasonable request. But actually what was interesting is he had tried to sort of hijack the whole thing and dismiss me as just a gossip monger. And all the comments below were from people saying, well, I wasn't going to buy this book before, but I am now. So he's been my secret weapon.
So Jacob Rees-Mogg is the
I'd like to thank
forward.
him publicly.
Anyone who's publishing a book needs Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Exactly.
So
I would recommend an interview with him.
So going back to the beginning, did you have an opinion on the former Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew before you decided to write this book, or did you?
No, I come to my books with a completely open mind. I mean, I'm there just to follow the trail that I find. My wife had known Sarah Ferguson. The mothers had been at school together. I actually had a meeting with her to see if she would cooperate with me. It was an opportunity to shape the narrative and to let her push her side of the story, and indeed for Prince Andrew to do the same. So there was no agenda to this book except to be as fair and accurate as I could be. The problem was, following the evidence, I didn't find many things that were particularly positive about them, though I tried really hard.
So what did you find that was positive about them? Because, for example, I have contacted a fair few people in recent days before this. People say of Sarah Ferguson, kind, caring, motherly, fun, the life and soul of the party, jolly, brilliant mother, steadfast and stoic, invariably brave, all of that stuff.
I wouldn't
of him, they say, he excellent in his royal service when he was in the military, that type of stuff. He was good at charity work. They don't say much in his favour as opposed to her. They're actually kinder to her. Would you say people were kinder to him or kinder to her?
No, of course they're kinder to her. She's a very sympathetic figure, and in some ways they're both victims. So I wouldn't demur from anything that you've said there about her. I would question her being a good mother. I mean, I talked to someone today who said that she never actually turned up at any of the schools the children attended because she was busy working. And I would demur on Andrew's naval career, which was actually pretty pathetic. I mean, he was always given good reports because that was the way his superior officers got promoted. But he was the worst pilot in his squadron, even though they gave him the prize for being the best pilot. He was passed over for commander 3 times. He eventually had to leave the Navy because there was no place for him. They created roles for him. But I talked to his commanding officer in the Falklands, I talked to his naval mentor who did his career advice, and I talked to probably about 40 people who served in the Navy with him, including 2 of the people who served with him in his Sea King in the Falklands.
Okay, well, I'll turn it round on you. Now, here's the criticism of the pair of them. So, of her, the people who wrote to me said, she's a Jekyll and Hyde-like woman, she's two-faced, she's superficially thick, she's like clotted cream, thick and rich, greedy and needy, a grifter, more cunning than you could imagine. Of him, they said, bully, self-important, arrogant, snob, and thick. So the connection is the thick. But what do you think from your investigation? What do you feel their true characters are from your investigations into
Well, I think those comments are fair about them as well, but we're all very complex people. The role of the biographer is to try and come to some conclusion about people, because clearly people want some direction. But the way I work is to collect the impressions, not to impose my own views on anything. I mean, clearly I can direct it by the material I choose to include. But the point is, it's almost like a Seurat painting. You're getting this mosaic. And then people can draw their own conclusions. So in my previous books, people have often come to me and said, you were very sympathetic to that person, or you were actually quite hard on that person. And people just read into these books what they want to read. But you present the evidence from people, and then people can draw their own conclusions. But people are very complex and contradictory.
Well, moving along, the drama of their story. You begin by talking about how she, aged 12, wanted to marry him.
I don't think I'd say that, actually.
But that was
that's what she says.
That's what
there's
she
no
says,
evidence
yes.
to support it. But actually,
well,
with
in her own words, let me find it. Somewhere on here. I have to find it. She did say...
I mean, she's given interviews saying that, but I found nothing to support it, talking to childhood friends of hers.
She did say when they got divorced, I wish we'd never got divorced. He and I both wish we'd never divorced, but we did. I wish we could go back to be the bride again, but I can't. This is the kind of thing she comes out with. But she did say at the beginning, she wanted to be with him from the age of 12. And she set her eyes upon doing this, and this all happened, and there was this whole wonderful thing, and the public at the beginning thought, what a wonderful thing. Now, how did it all fall apart?
Well, it didn't. Well, I'll answer your questions in turn. I mean, the person who was actually meant to be involved with Andrew was Princess Diana. They're actually closer in age, and that was the relationship people thought about. I mean, I have to say, a lot of things that Fergie says are not true. And often contradictory, and she will often, say one thing in one interview and something completely different the other, and she does kind of rewrite history. So the fact is that the parents knew each other. They would go. I mean, she would clearly go to polo matches because her father was Charles's polo manager. But actually, they had no contact. They went off to boarding school. They had no contact really until they were brought together by Diana in the summer of 1985. There's no evidence that there was anything there. She didn't have pictures on a wall of Andrew, anything like that. They were brought together by Diana because they were both on the rebound from relationships. Him from Koo Stark, who his parents had said he couldn't marry because she was seen to be a bit risque, and she from Paddy McNally, much older, wealthier,
and controversial also.
Sorry?
And slightly controversial also.
Well,
in regards to the way that
he had a sort of lifestyle. He had a lifestyle that was, shall we say, quite racy. He didn't treat Fergie very well. He was very rich, but he was a widower. He didn't want to marry her. And Diana brought the two together, thought they would get on, as indeed they did. And there was there was a strong physical attraction. They were drawn to each other. And I mean, he was proposing marriage within months of them meeting. So, but the problem is, if you read Fergie's autobiographies, every version is different. She's rewriting the story every time. And,
So would you say Fergie is a victim, or is she a calculating, cunning vixen in this story?
Well,
because
she's
everybody
both.
portrays her as this simple little lady who is the kind-hearted, nice, charitable lady, good mother to her children. I've met her on many occasions. She's terribly nice, not very bright. That's the simple analysis that one could present. But beneath it all, there are the people who say more cunning than you could possibly imagine.
Well, she's both, yeah, of course. I mean, she's very charming. She's good company. She was extremely good at her jobs in PR. She's very good at bringing people together. I think she's a very good humanitarian. But she is, and this is, lots of people have both sides in the character. She is a sort of Becky Sharp
So could
figure.
I turn the
So
turn
she does.
it to
Well, she is an operator.
So could I turn this now to the matter of a certain important detail that nobody else other than myself is very interested in, which I think is actually more important than anything else. The loan from Jeffrey Epstein. The Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein and all joined together, and Fergie gets a loan of £15,000 from Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't think £15,000 is the correct number, because I don't think she would be even grifting for that number. And I don't think that number is correct. I think there's a lot more beneath the surface. What do you feel about the loans and other benefits that were acquired by...
I do delineate throughout the book, the fact that she was taking money from a lot of people. A lot of people were supporting her. She had these huge debts. She's very extravagant. She's very generous. She has, inability to deal with money. I mean, the Queen paid off millions of pounds of debts for her. You're absolutely right. It wasn't £15,000. It was more like £2 million. And to be honest,
that's a good point here. That is a groundbreaking piece of news. I think we've just broken here. £2 million is the number we're now.
Epstein didn't bother with £15,000 either.
And of course, that was the relationship. Epstein did not do small chicken feed, did he?
The relationship worked well, because Epstein got clearly status, and he got access to people, contacts. That Andrew picked up through his time as a special trade envoy, and Andrew got again more contacts, which he accepted when he did he talked about when he had the Newsnight interview. He had a ready person who would pay Fergie's bills, and he had someone who would supply him with young women.
Going back to her, I asked her personally, did you ever repay the loans and other benefits you took? She said no comment. I said the word comment is superfluous. Now, you're saying she took at least £2 million. This is a lot of money, and she hasn't repaid it, clearly. That is obviously evidence in that matter. Where do you think this will all go next with the tranche of emails that is about to be released, hopefully, about Prince Andrew? Because the emails between her and Jeffrey Epstein will concern that loan, that money, and how it was transferred to her. She will have been very nice in her little correspondence, because I know what she's like in her emails. I've had emails from her in the past. And I will say, this lady is not quite telling the truth on this.
Well, I mean, there's a long history of her getting loans from people and then not repaying them. So Epstein is at the end of a long line of people. Precisely, where she just assumes that if they give her money, it's a gift. In terms of what's likely to come out now, we just don't know, because clearly the Epstein files have been heavily weeded. There will clearly be no references to Donald Trump in them. But we just don't know what will be there. We don't know what will be, if there's more Bloomberg material, and they've got 18,000 emails that they've been going through. It revealed clearly the relationship that Mandelson had with Epstein. Okay, but whether it will touch on Sarah Ferguson, I just don't. We just don't know.
Moving on,
you can't assume anything.
Moving on to Mandelson and all the rest of it, and how Prince Andrew continued to have a relationship with Prince Andrew when they went for the little walk in the park and all the rest of it. The Jess Staley connections, all the money there.
Well, what we know is that,
your feeling about all this.
Andrew claimed in the Newsnight interview that he'd only met Epstein in the late 1990s, and they parted company in December 2010. The truth is that they met 10 years earlier than that, and we know that because Andrew's own private secretary wrote a letter to the Times saying that. And we know that because a man called Steve Hoffenberg, who was involved as a business partner with Epstein, said that. We also know, as you say, from depositions that have come out in other legal cases, that Andrew continued to have contact with Epstein long after 2010. I think the other thing we need to bear in mind is Sarah Ferguson, who claimed that she had no idea about what Epstein was like, and she stayed in his residences, which you couldn't stay in without realizing from the pictures of naked girls in it, the phallic soaps, everything else, that there was something slightly odd here, not your normal Airbnb. That she continued to remain in touch with him. I talked to the doorman of one of his properties, and she was staying there often twice a month, until 2015 when the doorman left that
And
job.
we
So that's
had-
5 years after she said she'd stopped contact.
And
So which is why you
2008
can't believe, I'm afraid, anything that she says.
2008 was when he went to prison.
Yes, well, I mean,
Well, technically went to prison. Let's be honest about that, because he was allowed day release and he could do what he wanted. But what is most interesting is obviously the birthday book that has come out, which obviously everyone's talked about Donald Trump's drawing of the breasts and all the rest of it. But there was a man called Elliot Wolk. So Mr. Wolk was a minor feature in the 283-page document, which I bothered to go all the way through, which most people didn't, and the mainstream media chose to ignore. Elliot Wolk chose to talk about the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein in the 1970s and Robert Maxwell and the teenage daughter. Now, I know you've probably read the page, but you haven't known the context. Mr. Elliot Wolk, it turns out, is also a big supporter of, guess who? Hillary Clinton. I will reveal that this evening to you. He is also a big supporter of Donald Trump. And that is the kind of thing in this story that one has to know about. What would
Well,
you
it's
have
a
to
much
say
bigger, it's a much bigger
about
network.
the web of how complicated all of this story is? Mr. Wolk is somebody nobody talks about, but he was the mentor of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, I mean, the great mystery is how Epstein made his money and why Lex Wessner gave him money and gave him power of attorney. I mean, it is part of a much bigger story, and hopefully things will now begin to emerge. I mean, and clearly there are lots of names have been quoted, quite apart from Prince Andrew. So let's hope that maybe some of those names come out. I mean, Sarah Ransom, who's one of the victims, has talked about Richard Branson, Bill Clinton, an American...
Peter Nygaard,
Yes, but
who is in prison,
yeah, exactly.
whose son talks to me all the time, who's changed his name because he does not want to be associated with his rotten, evil father.
Yes, there are a lot of names.
Sarah Ferguson was quite happy to be photographed with on an island. Again,
Yeah, there are many more names. That I mean, and clearly we have the Black Book with all the names of various
Do
people
you
there.
believe the black? Okay, could I ask you a
But
direct
what I would
question?
say is also you mustn't believe everyone that was in the Black Book and everyone who flew on the Lolita flights was involved in anything illegal.
I would like to say at this point, the Black Book is Ghislaine Maxwell's Black Book, primarily. Most people in that book are connected to Ghislaine Maxwell. Most of the people I know who are in that book are people who knew her. They'd never met this man. They all say, we don't understand why we're in his book. We knew him. Her, not him. And that is how it worked. She was the connector. But what it comes down to at the truth of the situation is Robert Maxwell recruited Epstein to launder money. And that is what I've been working on for years. And that is the truth of that part of the story. He was a money funnel for that. That is a different part of this story. But going back to Prince Andrew, he was a pawn in the game, was he not?
Well, as I say, Andrew gave Epstein access. He gave him connections and respectability, and was a very useful idiot, really, and low-hanging fruit. But he was one of many people that Epstein was working on. The way that Epstein worked was he traded information. He would, of course, blackmail people. Everyone who went for massages in any of the properties was filmed. And then Epstein collected compromat and he traded in this compromat. But, he traded in contacts, he introduced to people, he was a fixer.
But Epstein was effectively, at the beginning, a taxi driver. He came from Brooklyn. He was a poor boy. Somehow he ended up meeting a family called Lesse, I don't know how you pronounce it. They are very rich financiers. They are very litigious and they don't like me because I've dared to talk about them in the past. But they brought him to Britain. And he, I believe, through this man Wolk, who I'm one of the first to really talk about him, I can go into his entire history, his entire political donations, and I will be doing in the coming days. This man was the connector of all of these people? Where is the missing £500 million from the Mirror pension group?
Well, I'm sorry, I haven't researched this. It wasn't really part of my brief.
No, well, but it does connect to
Maybe this is something for
how
another
it
occasion.
makes them respectable.
Well, I only did a certain amount on Epstein because he's only part of the story. My focus was on the
them.
two of them.
So
And it's
moving
only
back
really how they relate to, how Epstein relates to them that I looked at. I'm
Okay,
afraid.
moving back to them, you shared a thing by my late friend Christopher Hitchens. It was him speaking from the grave about Trump last night. Now,
Yeah, that was
I
an
thought it was an
extraordinary.
11-minute exchange. Now, I thought it was kind of scary because Christopher Hitchens and I used to be friends long ago, like many years ago before he died, and I couldn't believe his voice was speaking, but he was speaking rationally about Trump. Now, obviously, Trump has been here for the last few days. How do you think this changes anything in this setting? Will anything be forgivable? Will King Charles be a bit more forgiving of Prince Andrew, or will he be parked? Or
Clearly, Trump's visit is a reminder of Andrew's links to Epstein. No one wants to annoy Trump at the moment. Everyone is doing their best to charm him. So clearly, if anything does get released during the visit, I think it's unlikely now, that clearly would have been very embarrassing.
well, the projection onto a building didn't exactly help, but.
Well, yes, I mean, clearly Trump can't run away. I mean, he pretends that the material in the birthday book isn't his signature, but everyone else has admitted.
Now,
their
the
signatures
very
are there.
interesting thing was that at that dinner was Rupert Murdoch. Now, was that an opportunity for Rupert Murdoch to do a deal and say, I'm going to pay you a bit of money, or was that going to just...
Who knows what goes
Who
on
knows?
behind the
Precisely,
scenes?
who
But I mean,
knows?
Rupert Murdoch has basically bent the knee to Trump. So, for example, in my own book, some of the references to Trump were taken out, even though my evidence was rock solid, and that was just taken out by the publishers not to annoy Trump. But I can understand why they did it. Who wants to get into a fight with someone like that when this is actually pretty incidental stuff?
So coming back to your book in particular, and who tried to silence you,
well,
who were those people?
Well, it's inevitable with a book like this that some people won't like it, that you scratch at things that people prefer not to be affected. There's some papers that haven't covered the book. That's their prerogative. There's some papers that did interview me, and then I was told that the papers didn't want to run the piece for legal reasons, even changing it. But I mean, again, these things happen. But plenty of papers have covered it.
Your book's been a great hit, so it's been an absolute...
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's different from a lot of previous royal books because, in some ways, I haven't pulled my punches, and I've tried, as far as possible. And I mean, the lawyers have insisted on this, that everything is backed up, so it's often double sourced. It's people signed off on things. A lot of royal books are often based on cuts on a few tame people who fed them stories. And what I've tried to do is get a range of people who've never spoken before, and to get them on the record. Senior people, senior diplomats, senior naval officers, to do what you would do for most biographies, to get authoritative sources. So hopefully that has made it more difficult to criticise.
I'm going to ask you a final question before we ask a few questions from our audience. What do you think the future is for Fergie and Andrew? Who is going to be paying for them, and why? Will they continue to make ill-judged appearances, or do you think their appearances are acceptable? Will Fergie still be the main bread earner in the house? Will she still be coming out with ridiculous remarks like she communicates with the late Queen via the corgis? There's a few little points I just want to ask before we end, and we ask a few questions of our
Well,
audience.
we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think the best advice would be for Andrew clearly to go into exile and to get away from, appearing, exercising in Windsor Great Park every day in the Mail. I don't think Fergie is the great breadwinner there. I'm not sure she's contributing anything. But she will continue to make money. She will bounce back. She's the Houdini Rasputin of the royal family. Andrew is still making money. I mean, I don't know why he's not keeping up Royal Lodge, because he's got business deals still going. So I think there's a choice that it can be business as usual, and people hope the problem goes away, or they take a slightly lower profile. I mean, Fergie will work on her charities, and that is her sort of escape route. And people will say what a wonderful person she is.
What about her tea companies?
Well, I mean, as I say, that will be her escape route, and people will say how wonderful. What they don't realise is the rather complicated and a relationship between the businesses and her charity work, and the very opaque nature about the way that she's being financed, and indeed her children are being financed now, particularly in the Middle East. So, I think Fergie is the great survivor. I think she'll still be with us. Andrew, I think, will be a lower profile, but I'm not sure that anyone is going to bite the bullet with him. Perhaps William. I'm not sure that he will lose any of his titles. He's still a Vice Admiral. He's still a Knight of the Garter. I think the tradition has always been never complain, never explain, and the problem will go away. And it's just a question of how, whether more scandal emerges, and finally someone feels that they need to cut this damaged limb from the monarchy so it doesn't infect the whole institution.
Well, I would say they had it all and they threw it all away. As we're way to sum those two up, but can we open the floor to some questions from some of you?
I'll ask you a question.
Right, a question straight away from.
Right.
Do you know, or do you have any idea whether he got the money to buy off Virginia Roberts from his mum or from Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't think he got the money to pay off Virginia Giuffre from Epstein. I mean, there are various people being quoted, and I just don't know who it was. Some say it was Prince Charles who lent him the money, and then the money came from the sale of the Swiss chalet. Others say the Queen paid. Some say the Queen paid the charitable contribution to Giuffre's charity. We don't even know what the sum was. Sums have been quoted. I don't know whether we'll ever know the sums. I mean, perhaps when they do the probate of Virginia Giuffre's estate, that may come into it. But there's so much of this we don't know. I mean, all I can say is that the gagging order was only a year, so it's very interesting that it's taken a couple of years for her story to come out. But it also suggests that if Andrew agreed to only a 1-year gagging order, she was in a very strong position in terms of the negotiations.
Right, we have a question here.
I think it's really interesting that growing up, it was Fergie who commanded the lion's share of the column inches compared to Andrew. And now it's almost the other way around. And do you think that's because of the scandals Andrew's found himself in, or is it because of changing media attitudes and gender, or what do you think is the reason why?
Well, it was always
much lower.
It was always very difficult to research Andrew, because a lot of people don't talk. People actually were more inclined to talk about her. I mean, she gives lots and lots of interviews. She's written at least three volumes of memoir. She's always in the paper. She's always doing stuff on Instagram. So we have lots and lots of testimony from her. The problem was that for a large part of this time, Andrew was in the Navy and he was at sea, so it was quite difficult to get reports of him. And there is this very strong omerta around members of the royal family. People don't want to be excluded from their social circle. There was amazingly still a lot of loyalty. I found, for example, I did get ambassadors to talk to me about his time as special trade representative, but a lot of ambassadors say I'm Her Majesty's ambassador. I'm not going to talk about something I picked up in the course of my career. So I think there's a lot of deference to the royal family, and so which people didn't have quite so much towards her. But yeah, the danger was the book would be overshadowed with material on her. And we had to cut a lot of it out. I mean, I was saying to Alexis, I've got enough for another book on Fergie, if I wanted. And of course, this is always, and again, people feel Andrew is the more interesting figure because of Epstein. But actually, in some ways, she's the more interesting figure. He is a rather sad and rather pathetic figure, really. Whereas, she has her good points, and she is a survivor. This isn't the end of Fergie by any means.
So, any more questions?
Yes. At the very beginning, Andrew mentioned that it's the third book in a trilogy of the royal marriages, and obviously the difference is obvious because the previous two subjects, two couples that deceased and dealt with archives. Hence now it's living with a living couple who still potentially has a chance in a way to make their amends, or so what we think. Was there anything different in presenting the material, writing it and summing it up, as in holding a hope that perhaps it kind of wakens them up or was the side of some kind of repentance from them, or is it the ending as in the previous books, just the statement of the facts, and you don't hold any hope for the outcome of the information that you presented might.
Well, it's a good point. You can't do a summing up because they're clearly still alive and things can still happen. I'm not sure Andrew can come back. I don't think he wants to come back. He's not interested in any form of penance. He wouldn't understand that. I think, as I say, Sarah is actually very adept at manipulating. I mean, there's a huge PR team, a legal team behind her, and there is a huge curation of the story, particularly with Sarah. And so she will find a way of redefining her reputation, her legacy. In terms of telling the story, then clearly, I mean, it's the same thing. Instead of having documentary evidence, you have the testimony from interviews, which, in some ways, documents, can lie in the way that people interview can lie. So, for example, there was stuff I had from Epstein, but, just the fact that Epstein said it doesn't mean that it's true. And that can be true of anyone who you interviewed. That's why you need to verify it with double sources. And you've got to always remember that people have another agenda when they talk to you, and you have to bear in mind, where they're coming from and what they hope to achieve, and also that you may be being fed false information in order to undermine the credibility of the book, and then people can say, look, this is all rubbish. So, I mean, there are lots of things you need to be careful of when you go through it. And though, they're fake documents, documents tend to be truer than what people tell you. And of course also their memories can be incorrect.
Recollections may vary. As
well, exactly.
A member of the royal family said of a certain
Do
other.
you think there will be a revised version, or could we hope for the positive revised version of this book in the future?
Well, I'm planning. I'm updating the book for paperback, and people are giving me new information. I have to say it's actually reinforcing the tenure of the current book. But I mean, I would certainly be open, and if they wanted to collaborate now and encourage people to talk to me, who are their friends, I would happily include that. I mean, one of the problems is you can get half a dozen friends to say she's great with charity work, but that doesn't make a very interesting book. So you have to always bear in mind that you're not here, you're here to write something that's going to entertain as well. So that,
no one would buy such precisely.
Well, so you want to be fair, but at the same time, you're not in the pay of the person who is.
But equally, we've got people like Lady Victoria Harvey, who comes out with all this continual PR nonsense on behalf of Prince Andrew, yet he never confirms or denies anything she says.
Well, he doesn't. I mean, that's the strategy, not
That is
to
an
say
interesting thing, isn't it? Why does he never back her up?
Well, it's a very standard procedure, neither confirm nor deny, because once you begin to do one or the other, then people can begin to identify what's true. Much better just to keep quiet.
Precisely, and that was what sinks her like a balloon.
Well, I don't think you can take Victoria Harvey seriously, I'm afraid, from anything that she said.
I'm looking forward to reading the book. I'm not having read it, I have no idea what's in it. It will be fascinating if I only talk. Robert Maxwell was my client. I launched the European for him. Wexner was my client. I don't know if he's in your book.
Well, it doesn't really come into the story, but yes, I do know a bit about him.
Because you mentioned where did Epstein get his money from?
Yeah, from Wexner.
Wexner gave him the first job,
Yeah.
and it was Epstein who invested Wexner's money. Now, with Paddy McNally, who was a good friend of mine at the time, in actual fact, Fergie who I like, and I'm going to started off as a charity. So, I mean, there's so much that if you are doing an update or whatever, there is so much that has never come out,
No, absolutely, it's the tip of the iceberg.
especially that charity in Beverly.
Yeah, well, I will talk to you, and I have
Right.
talked to various
Well,
people.
Sorry.
Right, well, we'll carry on with our discussion.
Yeah, well,
Thank
thank
you.
you for coming. Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you, Liz. Yes.
But no, I mean, I think what's
Right,
likely
okay,
to
no,
happen
we'll,
is more people.
we'll carry on with our
Yeah.
program.
I think what's likely to happen is, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was an Andrew Morton figure who
Right.
comes and writes a book based on testimony from one of the Yorks, and presenting a sort of Omid Scobie figure who presents a slightly different view.
Okay, well, I'll give you a few quotes from dear old Fergie, and you can give your thoughts on them. I've been judged all my life, and I've no judgment on the Sussexes. Let's have a bit of your opinion on that. It must be hard for Meghan, and I can relate to her. Why can't Meghan be great? Why can't she be celebrated? I've been in Meghan's shoes, and I still am. There's always a twist of negativity, and it just gets so sad and tiring. I abhor bullying, and I feel desperately sorry for the pain they must be going through. So
Well, I mean,
how do
this-
you feel about Fergie and Meghan? Well, you know, they
Well-
are two different generations. What do you see
Fergie
as
is
the-
Meghan with more charm, and she's been doing what Meghan is trying to do for about 30 years, much more successfully. So in some ways, Meghan should be, looking at the playbook with Fergie.
Yeah.
But this, I'm afraid, is just another case of Fergie playing the victim and
Precisely.
trying to get
Now,
sympathy.
now we can have another question. I'm sorry about the interruption, but that was just an interruption. So let's have one more question before we have dinner. No, is anyone else? We must allow someone else to have. Anyone else with a question? Right, you have a question though.
I was going to ask if you this thing about not being able to sweat because of something that happened in the Falklands, which kind of rubbed off and now he can sweat again, and the thing about having lunch in the Pizza Express in Woking, which means it couldn't have been in Annabelle's nightclub by midnight.
Trap.
What do you think about all that?
Well, I'm afraid Andrew's a congenital liar. I mean, he's not a very good liar because these are lies that are easily exposed. I have a picture of him running out of a nightclub in 2001 when he saw Virginia Giuffre sweating. And there's actually the diary that they provided, that the family provided to the press, shows that Andrew wasn't in Woking at the Pizza Express. He was actually having a manicure.
It could have been, and it's only about an hour's drive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what is slightly worrying is that the policeman who saw him and checked him back at the North Gate at Buckingham Palace on the night that he saw Virginia Giuffre asked under data protection rules if he could have access to the logbooks. And initially the Metropolitan Police said that they were closed under national security, and then when he asked again, that they had been destroyed. So I'm afraid a lot of the evidence that would support Andrew, and of course any of his PPOs could have come forward and said actually he was at home, that hasn't happened. And the staff at Sunninghill, where he claimed to be that night, all have failed to remember if he was there that weekend or not. They can't remember. And none of the people at the party can remember. His own daughter can't remember. So we just don't know, but we can suspect.
The computer says confused.
Yeah.
I think the sweating thing will be quite easy to prove.
So on this note, I shall say thank you very much.
Yeah. No one has ever not been able to sweat and then suddenly been able to sweat.
Thank you to Andrew for taking the time, and thank you to all of you for putting up with me and my silly questioning. And now we shall have dinner.